In Ionia, magic is woven into the land. Forests spread vibrantly, and trees often boast nearly as many colors as leaves, touched by the wonders of the spirit realm. But there is one forest, hidden away, that draws on a different kind of magic. A garden with a tree at its heart that gathers humanity's dreams in its blooms. Excuse me. The Dreaming Tree grew from a seed of the god willow, which towered over the ancient grove of Omikayalan. Cast loose when the god willow was tragically felled, the seed took root in what came to be known as the Garden of Forgetting. Nurtured by the Green Father, Ivern, as many of the descendants of Omikayalan were, the Dreaming Tree spiraled up, spreading the magic of humanity's desires each time the dream laden What? Oh, shit. Hello, dreamers and dramatists. My name is TB Sky. And, what were we talking about? Oh, Lillia. Yes, right. I've got my notes. Just a sec. Right. Yes. So Lillia is not the latest, but one of the latest champions to be added to League of Legends, superseded very briefly after her release by Yone because Riot is trying to kill me. Lillia stands out among League of Legends champions for a few reasons. Now, first of all, most obviously, she is a deer centaur, a faun, more specifically, which is not fully unique to her. Hecarim is also a centaur, but he takes that concept in a very different direction. She's also a fairy or fae creature, more closely related to something like Yordles or the creatures that inhabit the Glade, where Lulu got lost for so long that she turned purple, than she is related to, say, the humans or the Vestaya of the world. Finally, she's fully conceptualized around the concept of dreams, which, again, is something that she technically shares with Nocturne, but she takes it in about as different a direction as you possibly can. Where Nocturne is, at least theoretically until Fiddlesticks comes along, a demon of fear and nightmares who is unparalleled in his ability to terrify the dreamers, Lillia is a caretaker of dreams. A shy and friendly little faun who collects the dreams of people and tries to add them to the magic of the world. She is as sweet and as saccharine as the sappiest Disney fantasy, and designed from top to bottom to be the most adorably unlikely hero that the game has ever offered. As usual with new champions, and unfortunately also kind of still usual for older champions, Lillia doesn't have that much lore to her, merely a bio and an accompanying short story for a little bit of flavor. Her basic lore goes something like this. After Ivern screwed up absolutely everything in Ionia by cutting down the God Willow, and you may remember that Ivern used to be a bloodthirsty warlord who decided to cut down the God Willow because something magic power, whatever. Anyway, turns out the God Willow had some seeds, and when it fell, those seeds landed on the earth where they flowered and took root. And the result of one of those seeds is the Dreaming Tree, which took root in the Garden of Forgetting, so called because anyway, it doesn't matter. The Dreaming Tree is nurtured and cared for by Ivern himself, now transformed into the Green Father. As the name implies, the Dreaming Tree absorbs the dreams of sleeping mortals, turns them into little buds on its branches, and when those buds bloom, the magic of humanity's desires is spread somewhere, probably in Ionia, maybe around the world. It's not 100% clear from just the lore whether the Dreaming Tree absorbs the dreams of dreamers everywhere, or just the ones that happen to be in Ionia. Whatever the case, it turns out that a tree called the Dreaming Tree can in fact itself also dream. That dream gathers into a bud, that bud blooms when the dream is ready to mature, and its name turns out to be Lillia. So Lillia begins caring for the dreaming tree and the dreams of mortals, and in the best tradition of adventurous Disney princesses who want more from their lives, she desperately desires to meet humans, these people who generate these wondrous, wonderful dreams for which she cares every day. Also, in the best tradition of saccharine Disney movies, turns out there's a plot twist. People can also be bad. War is happening in the outside world, implied, I think, to be the war between Ionia and Noxus, and that war is poisoning the minds of the dreamers that otherwise would nurture the dreaming tree itself. So the dreaming tree, Lilia's mother tree, is growing sick, and it is dying. When a group of humans, vaguely implied, I think, to be the warriors chasing down Yasuo after he flees his village, but when they enter the Garden of Forgetting entirely by accident, an errant sword stroke cuts off a branch of the tree, a branch upon which had been budding Lilia's own dream of meeting humans, which is like not the subtlest visual metaphor for the traumatic consequences of Lilia's dream finally being the thing that separates her from her mother and forces her to go out into the world and self-actualize. But subtle or not, it's effective, because now Lillia, armed with the branch that contains her own dream, feels the pressure and the necessity of answering the call to adventure, going into the world, facing down her own fears and shyness, and hopefully bringing back a cure for the mother tree that raised her. Which, again, if you told me this was the plot of a lost 90s Disney movie, then besides all the League of Legends nonsense that's also in it, I would believe you. And we get a preview of what part of the first act of that particular Disney movie would look like in her color story, The Garden of Dreaming. In this story, Lillia is meeting what might be her first human outside of the ones that came to the Garden of Forgetting. A little girl who has wandered away from her village and into a glade in the forest where Lillia, struggling with her crippling shyness, is trying to hide in the bushes as the girl sits on the ground and cries. From there, we get a bit of clumsy light comedy as Lillia fumbles her way towards trying to interact with this little girl, putting her very gently to sleep and attempting to get some dreams out of her. And we get a little bit of emotional intimacy and sincerity as through this interaction with the little girl, Lillia learns something about the tremendous importance of dreams. The girl's sister, you see, went away to the war and hasn't come back. And probably never will. And through dreams, Lillia is able to offer her some level of relief from the pain of that loss, some memory of the love that her sister had for her. And thus, she extracts the girl's dream and sends it back to the mother tree, and scurries away back into the forest as the girl awakes and runs home to tell her mother about the wonderful dream she had of her sister. Now, if this had been a Disney movie, this scene would probably happen like 10 or 15 minutes before Lillia runs into the main secondary supporting character, possibly also the main love interest who will be joining her on the journey, and then there would be a musical montage set to some kind of upbeat, sunny pop song as Lillia travels across the world and helps more and more dreamers unleash their dreams and becomes more confident in herself and Lillia has to fight the evil villain boss somehow, and it's probably going to be a her, because that's always how it goes in these things. And the movie ends and that happy pop song plays again over the end credits, but this time it's being sung by like a famous guest singer, and at least it gets everybody to appreciate the credits, which is a good thing because animators and the people who work on those movies are vastly underappreciated for all the hard work that they put in. Anyway, what were we talking about? Okay, let's just get this out of the way first. Haha, Nico and Hecarim had a baby and it's Lillia. Now, that particular little community meme came about for two specific reasons. First of all, Hecarim is literally the only other centaur in the entire League of Legends universe, which seems weird. Like, it seems like there should be at least 2 or 3 more champion ideas in a centaur-like champion. And the second reason is, well, Riot still does not have a great track record when it comes to creating interesting faces on their female champions, which I've ranted about before and we're not going to rehash it there, but the other reason why people immediately identified Lillia as similar to Nico is their color scheme. Now, on their in-game character models, they are easier to distinguish, with Lillia having a much warmer purple as her hair color and being defined primarily by the brown, creamy color of her skin and fur, while Nico's hair goes much more for blue and pink with an accent of green along with her pale skin color on the actual model. Speaking of which, why is Nico that pale? I've never really understood that part of her character design. Anyway, Nico and Lillia are very well distinguished in-game, but in their splash arts, they share a color scheme: purple, pink, and blue. And there's a reason for that. Now, we're going to have to skip over a bunch of context because this video isn't really about that, so if you want to learn more about pink, purple, and blue as color symbolism in media, Kyle Caldron has a fantastic video about it that you can click on a link up in the corner in the card right now, or find it down in the description, which I fully recommend that you go and watch because it's very good. But for our purposes, pink, purple, and blue are the colors of magic. Think of them as sort of the opposite of green, brown, gray, and yellow. The opposite of earth colors. The opposite of the color palette of a 2009 Call of Duty game. When an environment is all lit up in blues, pinks, and purples, you know you have entered some kind of unnatural space, something divorced from the normal rules of reality, whether that be a science fiction spaceship or perhaps the magical spirit realm of some fantasy world far, far away. And that tends to be how colors like that are used. For Nico, the pink, purple, and blue marks her out as an exotic creature, as a rare being, a Vastaya Shirei, more deeply connected to the spirit realm than even other Vastaya. It showcases her magical nature. And for Lillia, in her splash art, sitting there, illuminated by the pink and purple light of a dream floating gently from the forehead of a sleeping warrior, these colors tell us that she's not just a centaur or a faun. She's the dream faun, the caretaker of people's dreams and most precious memories. Now, just to get ahead of some comments that people are probably going to leave, yes, you can also use other colors to denote that something magical is happening. You can use greens and blues and yellows and reds and whites and whatever they may please your fancy to do, but purple, blue, and pink has a set of particular associations with the ethereal and the dreamlike in popular culture, and that's how they're being used in the character design of Lillia. The color scheme isn't all that there is to her, though. Let's talk about a couple of clever details that I really like. First, Lillia's eyelashes are flower petals. That is a really clever and useful way to both, give her the heavy makeup aesthetic that's so commonly associated with femininity, especially in fantasy heroines for some goddamn reason, but that's where we are, so that's what we gotta work with. Good way to do that, while also associating her with being, quite literally a flower child, someone who grew from the bud of a tree, which is something that carries through the aesthetic of the entire character design. Her hair cascades down in these long, flat plaits that remind me of leaves or flower petals. She's wearing on her body, as a substitute for clothing, something that looks like magical leaves that seem to grow just entirely upon her, and over her ears she wears these leaf-like bulbous earring things that end up in flower petals that fall down over her body, which has the dual purpose of both, again, connecting her to being a literal flower child, but also adds a little bit of bulk to her head, which comes in handy for some of the character animations we'll be taking a look at later. So, thematically, I think Lillia's character design is really well thought through. Clearly some consideration went into making the various elements of her character design, being a plant, being a flower child, but then also being a doe, fawn, centaur, forest creature kind of thing, work with each other, despite the difficulties of the contradictions between plant aesthetics and animal aesthetics that, well, still make Syra's character design kind of terrible on the whole. With all of that nice stuff being said, though, you didn't think I would do a video like this and not have a bunch of nitpicky criticisms, did ya? The first of which is this. Why does she have a belly button? Why does she have a belly button? She's not a human, first of all, so why? But if she had been in the womb of a mother centaur fawn, is that where the umbilical cord would have gone? And that's kind of a moot point anyway, because she wasn't in the womb of anything. She was born from a flower, so why does she have a belly button? Why is that there? It might have been because seeing a human torso without a belly button on it looks a little bit weird instinctually, but then she's furry anyway, just cover it up with fur. Why did you raised more questions than you answered by showing us the belly button? Another minor nitpick is, while I think it's a clever idea to have leaves literally growing on her that act as kind of her clothing, first of all, I think you can do that in a more visually interesting idea than just like pasting what looks like a rubber skin suit made of leaves over top of her. Like, leaves have shape and motion and texture. They're not rubber stuff that you just kind of paste onto yourself with hot glue. And I think some plant material that looks more like, actual plant material like leaves and petals and flower blooms would do a better job of connecting her with nature in the way that it seems this design feature is clearly intended to. Speaking of the leaf bikini, by the way, that thing is kind of sexy. And that's interesting, because as we've talked about on this channel many, truly, oh so many, probably too many times before, I'm not a huge fan of character design that kind of defaults to sexy to make a character appealing, when a different feature or aesthetic or a different kind of character appeal might work better for the design as a whole. And it seems to me that at least one artist at Riot agreed with me. This is some early concept art of Lillia that was posted along with her champion insights. This version has no leaf bikini, but that's okay, because it also doesn't have any breasts, and anything that might need to be covered up is covered up nicely by the fur that covers her body. And this has the effect of making Lillia seem much more childlike. And while it is a pretty basic design trope, if you want a character to be innocent, clumsy, shy, relatable, and be a character that the player instinctively wants to protect and find adorable, making them more childlike is a great way to achieve that. So why go in the other direction and age her up? Why explicitly call attention to the fact that she has breasts by giving her a leaf bikini to cover them up? Well, there's a stupid answer to that question, and then there's an interesting one. The stupid answer goes something like, men are stupid and only care about breasts, and therefore you put breasts on things in order to make money because men are stupid fucking morons who can't appreciate art, have no interior life, no sense of emotionality, and only care about being pandered to at all times by everyone forever. The interesting answer to the question, on the other hand, has something to do with the nature of Lillia's story. Because this is a young woman who's being sent out into the world to go on an adventure that will self-actualize her and help her make the transition from a child to an adult. If the Lillia we get in the story that's being told is an actual child, like an actual someone who's definitely not ready to become an adult yet, the story becomes really kind of cruel. Now she's alone in a cruel world, searching for the one thing that might cure the only mother she has ever known who's on the verge of death for reasons that she doesn't understand. And while you can certainly tell good and affecting stories about children confronting the darkness of the world in this way, that's also pretty dark. Perhaps a little bit darker than it needs to be for the character that they're actually trying to create here. So by aging her up, by making her like a young woman, teenager, someone who is at the very least on the cusp of true adulthood, it makes her feel a lot less like a helpless victim of extremely cruel circumstance, and more like a young woman taking charge of her own life and setting off on an adventure to become an adult and solve some kind of magical, interesting mystery in a way that won't invite quite so dark speculations as it might do if she was like an actual literal child being asked to shoulder the burdens of a fully grown adult. So yeah, if Lillia's story was a little bit more lighthearted, I think a more childlike design would probably fit her, but because it really isn't, then even though I have my troubles with the leaf bikini, and even though I think it does muddy the waters of her cuteness appeal a little bit to bring the sexuality aspect into it, having a visible indicator on the character that, no, this is a young woman, this is a person who's capable of handling this, probably isn't the worst idea. Anyway, this segment is running a little bit long, so let's return to a point that I started in on previously but didn't quite finish, which is the lack of variety of interesting female faces in League of Legends, because Lillia presents an obvious opportunity to solve a little bit of that deficiency. Because Lillia is a hybrid of a human and a deer. And yes, on a traditional centaur character design, you have a very clear separation between the human torso on the front of the centaur body and then the horse, or in this case, deer body on the lower half. But tradition is boring and stupid, and I think we could do better. And indeed, some people already have. Now, my suggestion would not necessarily be to make her face inhuman or make it entirely like a deer. It's not to turn her into a complete furry, in other words. Nothing wrong with furries, but in this case, I don't think think it would necessarily serve the design goals of the character. Lillia is, as I said, supposed to be this doe-eyed innocent facing the world for the first time, and for the purpose of that, I think it's best to keep her face as human-like as possible, but we can still introduce some elements that add some variety to her presentation without making her look specifically inhuman. And the one thing I would like to change on her is her goddamn nose, because League of Legends women all have the same nose, and I'm tired of it. So for Lillia, a character who is specifically supposed to look like a deer, let's just give her a deer nose, or some deer facial features of some kind, like literally anything. Look, these fan artists have already done it for you. They've made really interesting, good changes to Lillia's character design that gives her face some more variety without making huge overhauls to the character. You wouldn't even really need to change the character model. You could probably do it with a texture update. Just anything other than yet another concave anime button nose. I am so tired of them. Hey, fun fact, this part of the video is recorded about 3 weeks later than every other part of the video, because in between recording the voiceover for the video and recording the animation segment, I had to go and get myself a goddamn mouth surgery, now didn't I? Anyway, Lillia's animations, and I have a few that I want to focus on, are genuinely quite delightful. Like, this is some of the most fun animation that I've seen in League of Legends in a long time, and I mean fun in the sense that it's just kind of nice to look at. It's just kind of like look at this idle pose and tell me what kind of character she is. This is the thing I love most. Like, animation smears are fun, action animation is very cool, but this right here is the stuff in animation I love, which is character acting. You know everything you need to know about Lillia's approach to the world, how she sees other people around her, how she reacts to things from this tiny little idle animation loop. You know that she's timid. You know that she's easily startled. You know that she's uncertain and insecure. You know that she's constantly on the lookout for something, anything that might frighten her. And you know that she doesn't rest within herself. She has trouble quite literally standing still. Look at her hooves. Like, her feet are never standing still. She's never resting in herself. She's never comfortable. She's never at ease. And it's such efficient, effective character acting, telling you exactly what kind of person this is, simply by showing you, like, the way that they behave when they have got nothing better to do, when they are idle. This idle animation, too, serves some of the same function, in the sense that this is supposed to make her adorable. And it does, like, it succeeds at that, because what she's doing is she's throwing her stick up into the air, and then it bonks down on her head. Bonk. And then she stands there like, oh, my stick. And it's kind of base, like, it's kind of cheap in some ways. Like, it's the cheapest, like, oh, how do we make a character adorable? Let's make her clumsy. Like, it's such a cheap trick, but it's so well executed, and it works really well. And notice the coyote time that's going on here. Now, coyote time is something we've discussed before when we talk about animation, but it's basically, you know how in Roadrunner cartoons, when Wile E. Coyote runs over a cliff and he hasn't realized that he's run over a cliff yet, so he's just, like, running in the air and running in the air, and then eventually he looks down, and then you get that shot of, like, oh, that's a long way down. Then he looks at the camera, and then he falls down. Coyote time is the time between when he actually runs into the air and the moment when he realizes that he's supposed to be falling. And this is a thing that exists all over animation, especially in cartoony animation, but also, like, very serious, like, high action-oriented animation also uses coyote time all the time, because it allows you to manipulate the timing with which gravity affects various objects for the purposes of a scene composition or a shot, or to render a scene more dramatic than it really is. And so what we get here with her staff, as you'll notice, is she throws it into the air, so she has imparted upwards momentum onto the staff, but it just kind of, it doesn't go up, it doesn't move up or down. Like, gravity is completely suspended on it as it does this one flip in the air. Like, she throws it up, it does one flip, completely weightless in the air, and then bonk. Then it hits her head, and another bit of coyote time because it hits her head, and then it stays here. Then it floats just for one little second. It just floats a little bit in the air here, and then falls down on her arms. Notice how it looks in action. You get that little sense of delay as the staff is up, and then, whoa, dunk. there's that little moment of delay before it falls down and hits her head. And that's part of the charm and the timing of the whole thing, is that there is this sense of sort of cartoonish comedic time, which is also part of why this doesn't look like it hurts that much. Right? Because, it's cartoon logic. You can see from just the aesthetics of the movement of the thing that, no, she didn't actually hit herself over the head with a really heavy oak staff or anything. She hasn't got a concussion. This is cartoon, funny, the hurty head-on thing stuff. Don't worry about it too much. And that's also part of what an animator has to do with the aesthetics of movement that they choose, is they have to communicate how seriously should the audience take what happens here. If a character gets hit on the head with an anvil, should we say, oh my god, they've just received fatal head trauma, they're dead, oh god, the poor creature is dead? Or should we go, ha ha, and will fall on his head? And that comes down to the aesthetics of movement and the aesthetics of the visuals that surround the character, which is why also, notice when the staff hits her on the head, you see that donk, 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 donk. You see how... Oh, that's a reaction image to something. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely a reaction image to something. These edibles ain't shit. Me 2 minutes later. Something like that. And Lillia, by the way, has one of the most animated faces in League of Legends. And there's a distressing thing. It's something about the way they rigged her face, and and that's because you're supposed to see her from here. Like, we're supposed to see her from here, so insofar as her teeth are going to show at all, it's going to be something like this. So this is one of those ways, like, the model is constructed where if you look at it from the wrong angle, all of a sudden, all the subtle little ways that things have been lined up to work from the primary angle that you're viewing it from just don't really work anymore. You get expressions like this. It's absolutely a delight. I love it. But as you can see from here, it looks perfectly fine, which is where everybody will be looking at it. So, another animation that I wanted to take a look at is her home guard animation. And also just her run animation in general, but this is the one that's probably easiest to kind of see, because she has some fantastic run cycles in the sense that she doesn't actually do much running. What she's doing is called, what's it called? It's not called bucking. It's got a specific name, but it's a type of movement that deer and deer-like creatures, and especially gazelles, will do when they are very excited or when they're trying to move very quickly, which is doing this boing, boing, this springing motion. And again, note the use of coyote time in this run cycle, because she bounces up, and notice her torso, like the upper body. She has bounced up into the air, and she just stops. Like, she doesn't keep going, she just stops, hovers, and then falls back down. And so again, this is the use of coyote time, like suspending gravity whenever it is convenient for the movement that you're trying to communicate. And what's being shown here is that she's bounding across the battlefield, like she's doing doing, doing, almost like Pepe Le Pew, actually, in his cartoons, so come to think of it, since we're doing Looney Tunes references anyway. And one thing I really love about this animation is look at her little ears. Look at her, she's flapping her ears. It's almost like she's trying to fly with them. That is fundamentally, deeply, wonderfully adorable. And another thing I want to notice is look at the lantern, or the flower bud thing that she's got. Look how that reacts to the bounce. See how it rubber bands, like quite literally turns into a rubber band as it sort of bounces after her? And again, that helps deliver that sense of cartoonishly whimsical carefreeness, kind of, that comes through in I think this is her passive run. But it's a completely different aesthetic from what the thing is doing here. This is her home guarding run, which is like her most extreme run cycle. Here, the lantern, the string just stays a constant length. It doesn't have that bounce, which again is that thing of like the animator choosing which objects obey cartoon physics right now, which objects obey normal physics, which objects are acting on cartoon physics, and then balancing that out with creating the expression in the character that you actually want. And again, Lillia, as one of the most expressive characters in League of Legends. Oh, and she has some brilliant smear. She has some brilliant smear frames as well. I love this. I love this so much. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's terrifying, but it's wonderful. Excellent. Again, a smear frame, as we always talk about in these animation segments. These extreme smear frames are designed to be viewed from here, and you exaggerate things substantially when you have, like, first of all, a viewing angle from above, which means that you can distort the character vertically a lot more, and also a viewing angle that's from a long distance, which means distortions, even extreme distortions in the character, just don't appear nearly as extreme as they will if you zoom in all the way, where if you pay attention here, like, you can kind of see how much the character is, like, whing, how much stretching is going on with both her legs and her torso as she goes through this run cycle that just isn't visible from a longer distance. And again, the squash and stretch that's going on the whole, like, you can see here practically, like... I have to look away. No. Oh, God. Anyway, here, you can see practically her head. her head... her head is completely, like, shunted into... into her torso. Because it's rubber banding. Like, it goes from this extremely extended to zoing, and then being pushed back out by the movement as she goes upwards. And it's just like, there's so much. This is why Lillia has some of the most fun animations in the entire game. It's just because, like, pretty much any animation you choose, of the ones that are working anyway, not all of them are, unfortunately, but pretty much any animation that you choose, just it's so fun. Like, it's just like, this is an animator who was just having tons and tons and tons of fun creating this character's performance, and you see that especially here on her taunt. Again, like, that's just adorable. That's delightful. And again, Lillia, one of the most, and I wonder why they create these really detailed facial expressions for her. Because again, you're viewing this from here, and, like, I can't tell what expression she had. Like, even though they exaggerate the expressions extremely in order to make them work, I can't tell what her expression is like from this kind of perspective, and nobody in game is going to be able to either. So I can only think that, like, when they bother giving Lillia, like, a taunt like this one that has her, like, make these really expressive looks on her face, like that, and this, like, it, to some extent, I think they're just doing it for fun. Like, I think the animators might just be doing this because they're having fun doing it. Maybe also just in case, like, they want to do some content creation thing or promotional thing where they use the close-up animations on the character or something. But it is something that I've kind of wondered about, because a lot of League of Legends characters have no articulation on their faces, like, just none. Tristana has a lot of articulation, but that makes sense because her head is absolutely enormous, like, it's the size of the rest of her body, practically. So with her, it makes sense to give her an expressive face because there's a chance that the players will actually be able to see it, but Lilia's head is tiny compared to something like a Yordle, so I don't know. I'm curious about that. If any Riot animators see this video, please get in touch and tell me, like, do you do this because you actually think the players are gonna see it in game, or is it just, are you just having fun? Because either way, I think it's a great use of your time. Like, honestly, genuinely, I do. I think this is a wonderful way to talking about character performance. This is Lilia's taunt, right? Like, every other taunt in the game is some version of, like, haha, I am cocky and I'm going to murder you with my cocky superpowers thing, right? That's the basics of a taunt. Lilia's, though, look at the action that's going on. It's almost like she's startled by something and she goes, oh, it wasn't anything. Well, silly me. Like, it's self-deprecating, almost. Like, that same sense of insecurity, of uncertainty comes through entirely. And I love this, like, this thing right here. There. That. Do you notice what happens to her body here? First of all, it actually visibly deflates a little bit. She goes from this, like, oh, I'll take you on, to, oh, no, wait, there's nobody there. Oh. To this. So she goes from this posturing where she's trying to be tough to this, like, oops, complete and utter contrition. And you can actually see that the front, like her front legs, as they get gathered together in this kind of sheepish, like, oh dear, well, she's kind of pulling her legs together. It's like the entire front of her body kind of visibly deflates. Like she literally becomes a little bit smaller as she does this. And there's that subtle little movement of the legs that's happening as well. What you have here, like you have like one leg forward, you have the back legs spread out wide, you have a stature of not necessarily confidence, because I don't think Lillia can appear confident even if she tried, but like something that's taking up a little bit more space and saying, hey, I'll fight you, like that kind of thing. And then, look at this. Like, look at that little tiny movement. Like, it's not much. Like, there's not much happening with the change of her posture, right? It's not that much that's happening. It's just that she's bringing her front legs together, and she's bringing the back legs together a little bit more, and all of a sudden you get this completely different mood from the character. Like, even if we cut off her head, you can see this, like, from this, like, front-facing posture to this kind of shrinking into yourself, being, oops, sorry. And that, I love stuff like how much you can do for a character's expression just by shuffling the legs around. Just a little bit of change in how the legs are positioned. And all of a sudden you get a completely different mood from the character, and I just think that's lovely. Lillia, in general, has some absolutely delightful animation. Like, and I'm also a sucker for, like, cute, cartoony animation like this, with a very adorable character who has, like, been precision engineered to manipulate me into finding her adorable, and it's very successful at doing so. But this is good. I love Lillia's animations. She's an adorable character. Like, for all the criticisms that I may have of her character design, I could look at this all day. There's a lot to like about Lillia. She has a good character design, even if I wish it wasn't so middle of the road and didn't play into so many of the design tropes that already kind of annoy me in League of Legends. She has a very interesting story, which would allow her to play interesting roles in pretty much any other champion's stories, at least any champion that dreams. And on a fundamental level, the young woman goes into the world to find herself Disney princess adventure shtick is a tried and true story structure that can lead to incredibly compelling character narratives on the assumption that, you know, Riot actually follow up on anything that she does at all, which is always a bit of a crapshoot. Now, the appeal of the character probably comes down in part, at least, to how charmed you happen to be by her adorable, clumsy, skittish, shy personality gimmick. Because while that stuff charms the hell out of me, it's also the kind of thing that can get really old really quickly if a character shows no signs of ever, you know, getting over themselves a little bit. And that's the danger with the kind of character design that League of Legends does. Once you've created a character and put them in a certain place and had them occupy a certain niche or gimmick within the lineup of League of Legends champions, you kinda can't change them out of that. They will, to some extent, always have to occupy the box that they've been slotted into, because we're never getting League of Legends 2. We're never getting a time skip after which all the characters develop in their own personal story arcs. Lillia is now, as she will probably remain for the rest of her existence in League of Legends. And while it's charming me strongly right now, I do suspect that after 5 or 6 years of this character being exactly who she is and never changing, I might grow kinda tired of it too. I certainly have for other characters. Hey, thank you very much for watching another episode of What's the Deal With. I am slowly catching up. Now I just need to do Yone and then Samira, and then Riot will probably be releasing Seraphine before I'm done with either of those two, so... but we're getting there. We're catching up. And if you have enjoyed watching me try and catch up with Riot so that at some point maybe I can get back to doing What's the Deal videos about champions that are like more than 2 weeks old, then I would like to ask you to hit the like button down below. And maybe also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, you know, just click buttons, because that's how YouTube knows that the video was good and that people actually liked it. And if people don't click the buttons, then the video gets buried, and that makes me sad because it makes it harder to pay rent. Speaking of which, if you'd like to support the channel more directly than just clicking buttons on YouTube, then I have a Patreon, I have a merchandise store, and I have a tip jar. If you want to use any of them, then that's very helpful to me because of the aforementioned rent, but if you don't want to, that's completely okay as well. At the end of my videos, though, I do try to encourage people to if you have online content that you enjoy, no matter who's making it, whether it's me or someone else, I don't care, please consider supporting it directly with anything you can, whenever you can, because that $1 donation, especially to a small content creator, can literally be the same as thousands of views on a video. Direct support from the audience matters so much more than you think. Anyway, last thing I need to promote is that I have a second channel. I do Let's Plays over there. It's been dormant for a bit because I had mouth surgery, and so, but we're going to start up playing some games over there again. So if you want to follow me through Final Fantasy X, or maybe some Legends of Runeterra, now that there's the Targon update, I really need to try out some Celestial deck builds and be an absolute bastard. Those decks are awful. Then you can head on over there and subscribe and like and comment, YouTube, blah, blah, stuff over there as well. Outside of that, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to wash your hands, and if you're going to be around other people, do everybody a favor and wear a mask.